What I'm going to do now is to present the reason why we are here, actually. This is because JPI Climate started about 1.5 year process who was culminated with the adoption of our guidelines on open knowledge, and would like to share with you some insights of the process, why we are doing this, we are moving this direction, and what was the result and what are the next steps. In the presentation there will be some stuff who has been already at least partially mentioned by Irene Gabriel from the ministry, and I can also say that behind me you have a poster explaining some key issues, key information on JPI Climate, so you have further information here, and also contacting me and Angel from the Central Secretariat. In any case, we can start just showing you this slide on what is JPI Climate. JPI Climate is a collaboration in which there are currently 13 European countries plus 3 associated countries. They're trying to coordinate jointly their own climate research agendas with the goal, just at the top bottom in red letters, to make steps towards a co-alignment, what we say, or co-alignment of national activities. And we've been in these last years quite pretty active organizing international calls, like 2013 with the first joint call, and the second it is actually being developed right now, and in 2016 an ERANET on climate services will start, and within this ERANET will also organize an international call. And yeah, as I said, mentioned before, you find further details in the poster. So very quickly, this presentation has four main issues or sections, which I've already mentioned. Why we're doing this? Because we're committed with transparency. What is our approach? And this is a little bit in a provocative way formulated. Open access is not or it is not conceived as a means, but as a goal in itself. Sorry, as a means, but not as a goal in itself. And I will explain you later what we mean. And I will give you some insights from the guidelines, and then we'll go for having a look on the agenda of today and tomorrow. So JPI Climate is organized around 5 different governing principles, and these governing principles are related to different aspects, related to stakeholder involvement, to efficiency, to, for example, sustainability, and also to transparency. And regarding this transparency principle, we've committed ourselves to implement notions of openness, which have been presented already by Rufus, mutual learning, mutual dependency, and joint creativity. And we want to foster this free flow of information and of experiences, and lastly, knowledge. So this is also this notion of transparency can be also interpreted within our strategic research agenda, which is actually in being discussed, and a new version will probably come in the next months. And in any case, we also mentioned that this transparency can enhance this collaboration, for example, and also societal relevance, of course, of climate research. And not just in this level, but also in the very operational level. We have mentioned, we've heard that there are some of you involved in the so-called coordination and support action projects from the European Commission. We have also a CSA project within JPI Climate, and within this CSA project is actually one task devoted to develop guidelines and feedback to improve societal utilization of research outputs, and that's the very, so to say, operational level. One more. and the other one is more strategic level. So when we just one step behind, yeah, exactly. When we started this approach, okay, let's go to develop these guidelines on open access. Open access was indeed the first expression who came to us, yeah, and that's why I used the logo right now, because that was the first input we quickly identified to be decisive to develop the strategy. Open access, in this case, related to research results, but also to research data. But we relatively quickly realized that this is, of course, very important, but it couldn't be just observed as a single issue, isolated aspect, and that's why we tried to contextualize this open access story within what we identified on an issue on access and accessibility of this information, data, knowledge. But indeed, there's about more knowledge, as Rufus already mentioned. And actually, if you will realize, I will be using the same aspects of the openness definition from the open knowledge. So for us was crucial to contextualize this open access story within these availability and access issues. But not just, it wasn't just on having access or not, but what am I allowed with this information I can access to? I'm allowed to just to read them, or I'm allowed to download it, to copy, to distribute, to modify them. So it is very, these issues on to what extent can be used, this information can be used and can be distributed are pretty much important. But we wanted to go even beyond these both aspects, and we added and we concentrated also, and we had at least took into account a third dimension which has to do with participation and with universal participation, and we added this third dimension of the openness definition because we recognize that the question on who is actually participating in the knowledge creation and dissemination and evaluation and and this whole of research cycle is indeed crucial. So we came up at the end of this process to the expression in open knowledge, and that's why we named the guidelines on open knowledge. That was actually the first version called guidelines on I think it was access to knowledge, but then we renamed it to open knowledge. Please. So this is the result. These are the guidelines. They are available on the internet on our website, and these guidelines contain. There are two different versions. There's a short version for policymakers and a long version for people who want to know more about it. And this long version contains the main questions on what is the topic and why it's so important for us, what are the goals, and who is actually involved and who is playing which role. But the most important thing is that these guidelines contain a set of recommendations, both for internal purposes and both for well, okay, it's okay. No, it's okay. These guidelines contain some internal recommendations for us, for JPI Climate, and also some recommendations that are thought to other funders, to other actors involved in the climate research community, but even beyond this research, climate research issue, because we are within JPI community, and there are 10 different JPIs related to 10 different topics. So we would like to, that was also from the very beginning a goal, to have a kind of hopefully good practice, but to try to start this debate which has been recognized by the so-called high-level group on joint programming as a really cross-section and important for all JPIs. So behind on after this set of recommendations, we have also added, of course, a technical annex explaining all details of what actually these recommendations mean. And on the right side of the screen, you see what are the main topics which have been identified as relevant for these guidelines. So we are trying to make recommendations on internal accessibility issues, which is, this one is strictly related to our JPI recommendations, but then we go for open licensing, open formats, open access, funding open access to publications, open data, and so on. Next, please. So the result is this set of guidelines, but this set of guidelines is not just something that has been appeared in a couple of weeks and have been adopted by the JPI Climate Governing Board just without having a review process, but on the contrary, we set at least 9-month-long consultation process. We consulted first of all internally within our management committee, then we went for the whole governing board, and we asked governing board representatives to look for contacts, for national contacts, in order to review these guidelines. Some of the national experts are here and participated actively in the review of these guidelines. And then the result was, as I mentioned, the adoption by the governing board from JPI Climate, which was officially or formally the main or the first goal, but actually it can become useless to the extent that we have to adopt and practically apply these guidelines. So, and now, right now, precisely in this point is when all of you are called to make your contribution and to really actively give the guidelines more strength and more legitimation towards those who are supposed to apply these guidelines. So I've just written here what are the goals actually of these events, and the goals are, in an extremely briefly way summarized. We want to embed these guidelines within especially at the national level, because JPI is at nothing less than an alliance of national funders. And we wanted to, as I've already also mentioned before, we wanted to foster this topic and the discussion within the P2P or public-to-public community. This is JPIs, there are also many Aeronets, there are other kind of initiatives developing in the European research area. So we'd like to make also this development and this document also seeable for other actors, for other potentially interested actors. The goal today is not to obtain a new version of the guidelines, because the guidelines were adopted in May and they have been practically adopted, but to have a more strength version. And this is not obtaining a new version doesn't mean don't make any changes at all. There are different things. So we're open to make changes indeed, of course, but not to remake the guidelines. But well, ultimately you're deciding this because you're the experts. We have also listed some of the open issues that might be discussed today, but people who are really shaping this are you and the session facilitators. But just in case, was wondering whether, for example, recommendations of the guidelines are really appropriate or not, maybe are not realistic. I was also wondering on how could we better embed these many aspects beyond accessibility issues, because in the end I have to recognize that the guidelines are pretty focused on accessibility issues. So we're still lacking further discussion on what we call reuse and redistribution, and also universal participation. How to build capacity along this community, because this community is potentially very big, but we need some connectors and some brokers and some knowledge brokers. And there's today something here who has the name knowledge broker in their own organization. So we need really these people being able to build capacity among us. And last but not least, what is the proper combination of carrots and sticks? Because these topics on open access, for example, they have also the side of, yeah, we have to do it, but there's also the other side of the coin. Like, for example, was asked before to Rufus, okay, this is great, but what are you doing? What should we deal with the IPRs, for example? This is a classical controversy, I guess. So just let me very briefly present the agenda. The agenda is, of course, please don't look at the left column, because it doesn't match anymore. But in any case, I will give then now the floor to the three persons moderating the sessions in order to present them. And then we will indeed proceed for the breakout sessions. The breakout sessions will take place separately in three different groups. Two of them will stay here. We will divide the room with this curtain, hopefully not made of iron. And on the other side, on the other part of the building, we have another room, a third one, and people participating in the number 3 on universal participation will have to move to the other room. Don't be afraid if you really you haven't discovered yet, because Elena will guide you properly. So I'm not going to explain you in detail this, because they will be explained, and just show you the draft agenda for tomorrow. Let's see how can we manage on our second keynote, which will be also in a virtual format. So will be everything but boring, I guess, after having seen this our experience today. Yes, and just tell you that the agenda, or at least the former draft agenda, is hanging there. So you have fully access to the agenda. Yeah, so just wish you, for us, a very enjoyable and productive symposium.